Before you hear this story, ask yourself one question. What would you do if the monsters everyone feared were the two sons a mother raised with her own hands? Because tonight's case isn't about ghosts, demons, or legends. It's about two 7-foot twin brothers who became the darkest secret of a woman who tried desperately to hide the truth of what she brought into this world. A farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. A mother who sleeps with her door locked every night. And two giant sons who whisper to the house as if the walls can hear them. But the real horror? The thing that crawled its way back into their lives? It wasn't the twins. It was the child that should have never been born. The one their mother buried alive under the floorboards and who has finally come back to finish the family. If you think you've heard every nightmare a family can hide, you're wrong. Because what happened inside that house is one of the most disturbing stories Forgotten Remains has ever uncovered. The Appalachians keep many secrets. Old ones. Cold ones. Secrets buried deeper than mines, older than any church, whispered only in porches and backwoods cemeteries where the fog hangs low like a spirit with unfinished business. But even in a land of superstition, hunters' tales and moonshine myths, one story sits above the rest. The story of the Harlan twins, two boys towering at 7 feet tall by the age of 15. Identical faces. Identical movements. Identical silence. People swore they never blinked, swore they never laughed, never played, never talked unless their mother was present. And even then, their voices didn't sound like boys. But the height wasn't what terrified the locals, nor the blank expressions, nor the way they stood completely still for hours, facing the woods as if listening to something inside it. What terrified people were the rituals their mother made them perform. Rituals whispered to be older than the mountains. Rituals that required blood, but never human blood, at least not at first. Rituals that involved bones carved with symbols no one recognized. Rituals that made animals go quiet miles around. Rituals that made even the sheriff refuse to go near the old Harlan Hollow. And yet, the story didn't truly start with the twins. It started with the man who went looking for them. A school teacher named Elias Thorne who believed some folk traditions were worth preserving. Until he discovered the Harlans were never meant to be preserved. They were meant to be fed. His journal, the only thing found after his disappearance, begins with a single chilling line. They were born for the rites. Their mother raised them for something beneath the soil. And what Elias saw inside that house, what he heard in those woods, no one survived long enough to describe. Except him. Barely. They found his journal by accident. In 1978, 15 years after Elias Thorne vanished, a demolition crew was hired to tear down the rotting Harlan farmhouse. The structure leaned like a drunk, windows blackened, doors swallowed by vines. Locals warned the crew not to work after sunset, not because of ghosts, but because of the silence that swallowed the hollow at night. A silence too heavy to be natural. On the second day, while pulling down a section of the kitchen wall, a worker hit something soft behind the plaster, wrapped in burlap, bound by twine, smelling faintly of iron. Inside was a leather journal, stiff with age, its pages warped and stained a dark brown that everyone hoped was mud. It wasn't. On the inside cover, scratched in desperate handwriting, "If you found this, leave before the ground starts humming." The crew didn't understand the warning. They weren't from the mountains. They hadn't heard the stories, but they felt something. A heavy pressure in the air, like a storm with no thunder, just waiting. They handed the journal over to the county clerk. No one bothered reading it until months later, when an archivist flipping through the pages screamed so loudly the sheriff came running. Because every entry inside was written by Elias Thorne, the missing school teacher, and his writing was not calm, not academic, not observational. It was frantic, broken, as if written by a man trying to outrun something while still holding a pencil. And page after page he returned to a single phrase: the twins are not normal children. They were shaped. He wrote about Margaret Harlan, the mother. Tall, severe, skin like bark, eyes like she hadn't slept in years. He wrote that she never let the twins out without her. He wrote that every night the boys carried bone charms into the woods. And he wrote that the ground vibrated under their feet. One line chilled the archivist so deeply she had to step outside to breathe. The boys do not speak to each other. They speak with something else. Elias described nights where the forest glowed faintly, where distant chanting echoed but never from human throats, where animals fled the hollow and never returned. I heard them last night. The twins, humming in perfect unison. And the earth hummed back. Elias Thorne had been a quiet man, a school teacher, a folklorist, a believer that every strange legend had a root in truth, and that truth deserved to be preserved. But nothing, not his education, not his fieldwork, not his calm temperament, prepared him for the day he walked into Harlan Hollow. He wrote his first impression in the journal. The forest does not welcome strangers. It warns them. The dirt road leading to the Harlan farmhouse narrowed until his car could barely pass. Thorn branches scraped the doors like fingers trying to pull him back. And the deeper he drove, the stranger things became. The forest was too quiet. Not peaceful, hollow. No birds, no insects. No rustling leaves. Just the sound of his engine and a stillness thick enough to feel against the skin. Then he saw the first artifact. A bone charm, hanging from a branch. Swinging slightly though there was no wind. Carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Then another charm. And another. Dozens. Hundreds. Some bleached white. Some dark and splintered. All carved. Some crudely. Some with disturbing precision. He stopped the car, walked toward one hanging at eye level, and immediately noticed something disturbing. The carving patterns were identical on every bone. Perfect copies. He wrote, "No human hand carves this consistently. Unless the person is obsessive or trained." The road soon opened into a clearing. At the center sat the old Harlan farmhouse, a sagging, two-story wooden structure leaning like it had been beaten by storms for a century. Every window was covered in cloth, not curtains, but stitched-up sacks hung from inside. On the porch stood Margaret Harlan. Her skin was pale as candle wax, her hair gray, long, unwashed, her dress colorless, stained with soil, her posture straight as a coffin board. But her eyes, Elias wrote, were the most unsettling part. Eyes that had seen too much. Eyes that did not welcome nor fear him. Eyes that looked past him, as though checking if something followed. She didn't speak. Didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just watched, until the door behind her opened. Two enormous silhouettes stepped out. Elias described the sensation before he saw them fully. The porch groaned. The boards bent. I felt a pressure in my bones before I understood why. And then the twins emerged, 7 feet tall. Barefoot. Skin pale and stretched tight. Cheekbones sharp. Eyes too large, too dark. Bodies lean, but corded with unnatural strength. They didn't walk like boys. They glided. They didn't look at Elias. They looked past him. Toward the woods. Both of them. At the exact same angle. At the exact same second, he felt a cold pulse run through the clearing. And then he heard it. A low hum, almost below human hearing. The twins were humming. In unison. Perfect harmony. Perfect pitch. A sound too smooth to be natural. Margaret raised a hand and the humming ceased instantly, like someone cut a wire. She finally spoke. "Mr. Thorne, you shouldn't have come here." Margaret Harlan did not invite Elias inside. She commanded him inside. There was no kindness in her tone. No warmth. No curiosity. Only a cold certainty. As if she already knew why he came and already regretted it. The interior of the farmhouse was darker than it should have been. Every window was covered in stitched burlap sacks, blocking out all daylight. Every wall was lined with hanging bundles, herbs, dried roots, feathers, bones tied with twine. The air smelled of smoke, earth, and something metallic beneath it. Elias wrote, "The house breathed, not literally, but the air inside felt alive, thick." Watching, Margaret walked ahead, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. She didn't ask him to sit, but he lowered himself into a crooked wooden chair anyway, afraid standing would somehow draw more attention. The twins stayed by the doorway, still, perfectly still, their chests barely rising as they breathed. Elias had worked with many mountain families before, stubborn, private, proud people, but he had never encountered silence like this. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't rude. It was ritualistic. Margaret finally spoke. "You're a school teacher." He nodded. "You collect stories." Another nod. Her eyes narrowed. "Some stories are not meant to be collected." Elias tried maintaining professionalism. "I'm documenting folk customs," he explained. "Old traditions disappearing across Appalachia. I heard your family still practices." She cut him off sharply. "We don't practice. We remember." Her voice shifted. Deeper, harder. "Our blood remembers what the rest of the world forgot." Elias noted the phrasing. "Not we remember. Our blood remembers." The twins still hadn't moved. Not a twitch. Not a blink. Margaret continued. "You saw the charms in the trees." He nodded. "And you think they are superstition." He opened his mouth to speak, but she snapped. "Don't lie." Silence fell again, the kind that hums inside the ears. Finally, she leaned forward and said the line that would haunt him until his last breath. "The bones are not warnings. They are boundaries." Elias swallowed hard. Boundaries for what? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she slowly lifted her hand and pointed toward the twins. Not lovingly, not protectively, but almost ceremonially, like presenting two objects, not sons. "They keep the rights alive," she whispered. "They keep the boundary intact." Elias asked, "What boundary?" Margaret looked toward the floorboards beneath their feet. Not the woods. Not the charms outside, but below the house. The silence deepened. Then she said, "The one that should never open again." The floorboards creaked. Not from footsteps. Not from movement, but from pressure. A faint vibration moving under the house, rolling through the timbers like something shifting deep beneath the soil. Elias wrote, "It felt like the earth exhaled, directly under us." He tried to keep his voice steady. "What's beneath your house, Mrs. Harland?" Margaret stared at him for a long, cold moment, then whispered, "A debt." And behind her, the twins began to hum again, quiet at first. A soft, spine-tingling resonance that made the hanging bundles tremble. Margaret didn't stop them this time. Elias stood up slowly, heart pounding, but she raised a hand. Not to stop him from leaving. To warn him, "Sit down, Mr. Thorne." He did. The humming grew louder, deeper, more synchronized. And then he realized something horrifying. The floor was humming back. Elias Thorne had experienced fear many times in his life. Storms, wild dogs, getting lost in the mountains as a child. But nothing compared to the moment he felt the floorboards vibrate beneath his shoes. Not from footsteps, not from machinery, but from something alive. Something down there. Something answering the twins' humming. He wrote, "The vibration was subtle, like a breath under the house. Slow. Rhythmic. Ancient." The twins remained by the doorway, their heads tilted slightly upward as they hummed. Their chests rose and fell in perfect synchronization. Their eyes were unfocused, almost trance-like. Margaret Harland stood between them and Elias, her expression strangely serene, as though this sound was familiar, comforting even. Elias forced himself to speak. "What is that?" he whispered. Margaret didn't turn around, didn't blink. Instead, she placed her palm flat against the wall, a gesture that looked oddly reverent. "The land remembers." Her voice was low, soft, chillingly calm. "It speaks when the boys sing." Elias tried to steady his breathing. "That's not possible," he said. Margaret finally looked at him, with pity. "The soil is older than your books, Mr. Thorne. Older than your science. Older than your doubt." Then she stepped closer to him, her face inches from his, her voice almost a whisper. "Old things sleep under these hills, and they dream in vibrations." The humming grew louder. The table shook. The hanging herbs rustled. Dust drifted from the rafters. And suddenly, the floor gave a sharp crack, like something pushed upward from below. Elias stumbled back from the chair. Margaret didn't flinch. The twins didn't stop humming. He backed toward the front door, panic rising, when Margaret said sharply, "Do not step outside." He froze. "Why not?" he demanded. She turned to the window, the burlap sack fluttering slightly, though no wind should have reached it. Her answer came like a confession. "Because it heard you arrive." Elias felt ice run down his spine. "It? What is it?" Margaret exhaled slowly. Not angry, not fearful, just tired. "There is something below this house, Mr. Thorne. My boys were born to keep it calm." Elias shook his head. "That makes no sense." Margaret snapped. "The twins are not children." The humming stopped. Instantly, like someone cut a wire. The silence that followed was worse. So heavy it pressed on the chest. Margaret's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "They are the last of the Bonewright line. My family has served the Hollow for generations." Elias felt the room tilt, as if the house itself leaned closer to listen. Margaret continued, "We do not worship what lies below. We do not summon it. We only keep it dreaming." She pointed at the twins. "The boys know the hum. Only they can soothe the ground." Elias tried to move toward the window. He wanted light, air, sanity, but Margaret blocked his path with surprising strength. Her eyes were sharp, desperate. "Do not go outside." "Why?" he whispered. She answered without hesitation. "Because the humming stopped, and when the humming stops, the soil listens." Behind her, the twins turned their heads toward the floorboards in perfect unison, as if hearing something. A soft noise rose from below, a muffled, slow, dragging scrape. Elias went pale. He wrote, "Something was moving under the house. Something enormous. Something waking." The twins inhaled sharply, the first real breath he'd seen them take. Their eyes widened, and Margaret, for the first time, looked afraid. She whispered, "It's hungry." Elias Thorne wanted to run. Every instinct in his body screamed to get out of that house, out of that hollow, out of those woods. But Margaret Harland stood between him and the exit, her posture rigid, her breath uneven, her voice trembling with a fear deeper than anything Elias had ever heard from a human being. The twins stood behind her, taller than the doorframe, their heads slightly tilted as if listening to something beneath the soil. The dragging scrape below the floorboards grew louder, slower, more deliberate, like something shifting in thick earth. Margaret whispered, "It only stirs when it smells fear." Elias froze. "Something alive is underneath your house?" he whispered. Margaret did not blink. Alive is not the word. Awake is closer. The floor vibrated again, this time stronger, more forceful. A ceramic bowl rolled off the kitchen counter and shattered on the floor. The twins inhaled sharply, their breaths sinking like a single creature wearing two bodies. Then, they turned their heads toward Elias, perfectly, simultaneously. Like puppets sharing one string, their eyes locked onto him, unblinking, dark. Hungry? Margaret snapped her fingers, one sharp crack. The twins looked away instantly. Elias stumbled back, horrified. "What are they?" he whispered. She answered with a trembling voice. "Not cursed, not blessed, just born for the duty." Another scrape beneath the house, longer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. Something in the walls groaned like old timber bending under pressure. Margaret moved toward her sons, placing a hand on each of their chests. Their skin was pale, stretched tight over bone, yet warm, too warm. Their breathing slowed. Then, the humming began again, but not soft this time, not soothing. This hum was deeper, more frantic, vibrating the windows, rattling the jars, making the bone charms sway violently on their strings. Margaret hissed, "Not like that. Slow it. Slow the hum. You'll agitate it." But the twins couldn't control it. Their hum grew louder, faster, desperate, as if they weren't calming something, but begging it. The floor suddenly bulged upward. Elias gasped, stumbling back as a long, rising mound formed under the floorboards, like something was pressing its massive shape against the underside of the house. Margaret shouted, "Stop the hum!" The twins choked on their own breath. The hum cut off instantly. And then, silence. Not peaceful silence, not normal silence. A silence like the hollow itself was holding its breath. Elias whispered, Did it go away?" Margaret turned slowly toward him, eyes wide, pupils dilated. "No," she breathed. The silence deepened until Elias could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Margaret whispered, "It's listening." The floorboards creaked again. One by one, as if something enormous was shifting its weight right beneath them, deciding what to do next. Then came the sound that froze Elias completely. A deep, slow inhale from under the house. Not wind, not pipes. A breath. A living breath. The twins stepped forward in unison, protectively, instinctively, standing in front of Margaret. Their faces were expressionless, but their bodies trembled. Margaret whispered, "Nightfall is coming. Nothing survives in the hollow after dark. Not without the boys." Elias's voice shook. "What happens after dark?" Margaret met his eyes with a hollow stare. The boundary weakens. Outside, the last sliver of daylight vanished behind the ridge. Night fell, and the house exhaled darkness. Night in the old farmhouse wasn't silent. It couldn't be. Not anymore. The house breathed now. Slow, cold breaths that made the curtains drift even without wind. The wooden beams creaked as if something heavy walked across them, and every window pane rattled faintly, like fingernails tapping from the outside. Elena sat in her bedroom, rocking slowly, clutching a bundle of old letters pressed to her chest. Her eyes were swollen, her lips trembling. A lantern flickered beside her, casting long, wavering shadows across the wall. Those shadows. They moved wrong. Sometimes they moved before she did. She whispered to herself over and over, soft, trembling, terrified. They should never have been born. They should never have been born. The door behind her cracked open. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Dragged. Each step vibrating the floorboards. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Elena," a deep voice rumbled. "Mama, are you awake?" Her breath hitched. "I told you," she whispered. "Don't come into my room at night." But the voice came again. Closer now, inches behind her. "Mama?" A long exhale, a heavy chest rising and falling. "We're scared." That made her freeze. The twins, two huge, towering figures, had never admitted fear. Not once in 25 years. Elena slowly turned. The lantern light flickered over two colossal silhouettes standing in the doorway. But their faces were obscured by the shadow, as if the darkness itself wrapped around them like a shroud. The right twin spoke first. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone." Then the left one. "Someone else is in this house." The room felt colder instantly. She stared at her sons, her giant, twisted creations, trying to read the fear etched into their voices. Their massive shoulders were trembling. Their breathing was erratic. And then, they both looked over Elena's shoulder. Exactly at the same time. Exactly at the same spot. Their eyes widened. The twins, 7 feet tall, unbelievably strong, disturbingly fearless, took a step back. "Mama," one whispered, "it's behind you." Elena didn't move. She couldn't. Every instinct in her screamed not to turn around. A faint scraping sound slithered across the wall behind her, like something dragging a long nail across old plaster. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice breaking. "You were supposed to stay buried." The twins flinched at that word. Buried? Who buried it? "What did you do, Mama?" She shook her head violently. "No questions. Listen to me." Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "The more you look at it, the closer it comes." The twins' breaths caught. Both of them lifted their heads slowly, terrified, as if something cold had brushed along their spines. The scraping stopped. Total silence. Then, a voice. Soft. Female. Right behind Elena's ear. "You didn't bury me deep enough," Elena screamed. The twins lunged forward, but the lantern exploded. The room plunged into darkness, and in that pitch-black moment, the entire house shook with a sound so horrifying it didn't even seem human. A wet, dragging gasp, as if something was pulling itself out of the walls. Then, the screams began. Darkness swallowed everything after the lantern burst. The farmhouse plunged into a silence so complete it felt alive. Then slowly, the heavy breaths of the giant twins echoed in the pitch-black room. "Mama, where are you?" one whispered. Elena didn't answer. Something else did. A soft, wet inhale right next to them. The twins froze. Outside, the wind gusted, slamming against the old shutters, making the whole house tremble. The walls groaned as if decades of secrets pressed against them. A faint glow appeared near the ceiling, pale, greenish, unnatural, enough to reveal the outline of the room. And Elena, she was standing now, not facing her sons, facing the wall, her fingertips trembling over the wallpaper, tracing a shape beneath it, a shape that looked like a door. "Mom?" the right twin whispered. Elena didn't turn. "It's waking up," she said in a hollow voice. "The house remembers everything, even what I tried to forget." Her nails dug into the wall, tore away the wallpaper, revealing a rotten wooden panel beneath, outlined like a sealed door. The green glow brightened. The twins stepped forward cautiously, ducking under the low ceiling of her bedroom, their massive hands clenched. "What is that?" the left twin asked. Elena's voice cracked. "A grave." Both twins stiffened. "A grave? In the wall? Why is there a grave in your room?" Elena finally turned around. Her face wasn't the same. Her eyes were bloodshot, her cheeks wet with tears, her expression full of the kind of terror only someone running from their own sins could have. "No," she whispered. "Not in the wall." Her shaking hand pointed downward. "In the floor." Both brothers looked down. The old floorboards beneath their feet, the ones they'd walked across their entire childhood, seemed slightly raised in the shape of a rectangle. A hidden trapdoor. The house moaned. The green glow dimmed and brightened like a heartbeat. Elena sank to her knees beside the outline in the floor, her fingers trembling as she touched it. "I buried her here," she said. A long, cold silence. The twins stared at her. "Her who? Mama." "WHO?" Elena's breath shook. "The third child." The room turned ice cold. "There were 3 of you," she whispered. "But only 2 survived." The twins took a step back. "What do you mean 3? You never told us." Elena cut them off. "I didn't want you to know she existed." The wind outside screamed through the cracks in the walls. "She was born first. Before both of you." Her voice trembled. "But she wasn't human." The glow flickered violently. Elena lowered her head, sobbing. "She came out wrong. Bones twisted, mouthful of teeth already formed." She didn't cry. She laughed. The twins shuddered, and when she touched me, I saw things. Dark things. Things that weren't of this world. A soft tapping came from beneath the floor, as if something was knocking to be let out. Elena gasped, pushing herself away from the trapdoor. "I killed her," she whispered. "I had to." She wouldn't stop whispering to me. She wouldn't stop showing me things. "She crawled across the ceiling when she was 2 hours old. She tried to climb into your crib." The twins stared at the floor, horrified. "I buried her alive," Elena cried. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. From inside the wood, Elena shook violently. "She's not dead." The left twin stepped closer to the trapdoor, his huge hand hovering above the dusty wood. "Mama." His voice cracked. "What did she want?" Elena covered her face. "To come back." The tapping stopped. A long breath rose from beneath the floorboards. Then a voice, childlike, shaky, wrong, whispered through the cracks. "Mama?" "I'm cold," Elena screamed. The floorboards began to buckle. The thing beneath them began pushing upward. The twins grabbed their mother as the wood cracked open, and long, pale fingers reached through the floor. The floorboards cracked apart like ribs splitting open. A pale skeletal hand shot up first, long, thin fingers, nails blackened and curved like hooks. The skin was stretched tight over bones, veiny and translucent, like something that had grown in the dark without light, without air, without warmth. Elena screamed and stumbled backward as her giant sons dragged her away from the rising trapdoor. The hand clawed deeper outward. Then another. And another, like a spider trying to crawl out of a shell. The wood bulged upward, splintering loudly, and a head pushed through. It wasn't the head of a child. Not anymore. It was elongated, skull-like, the jaw unhinged too wide, as if broken repeatedly and healed wrong each time. Its eyes were huge and reflective, like polished stones pulled from the bottom of a well. Teeth jutted in random angles, too many for its small mouth. But the worst part was the voice. Mama. A wet gurgle. A sickly sweetness. You buried me in the dark. Elena collapsed to her knees, shaking violently. The creature's head twisted. 180 degrees, then 270, until it faced the twins. Its jaw clicked open. Brothers. Both giants staggered backward, horror carved into their massive faces. We're not your brothers, the left twin whispered. The creature blinked slowly. Blood remembers. The floor split wider as the thing crawled out, its limbs contorting, joints bending backward, spine rising beneath its skin like a row of crooked stones. Elena scrambled up and pressed her back against the wall. I killed you, she gasped. I killed you. Why are you still here? The creature tilted its freshly freed head, neck cracking like breaking branches. You killed a baby, it said softly. I grew into something else down there in the dark. The house groaned violently, beams above rattling, dust raining from the ceiling. The right twin stepped forward, slow, terrified but determined. We won't let you hurt her. The creature stopped moving. Then it giggled, a sound like a dying animal choking on blood. Mama hurt herself, Elena screamed. Don't listen to it! Don't listen! The creature's jagged fingers slid across the wooden floor, leaving deep scratch marks. She whispered to me for years, it hissed. She talked through the floorboards. She told me stories. Secrets. She loved me more than you. Lies! Elena sobbed. The creature pointed one crooked finger at her. She cried every night. One night, she said she wished you died instead of me. Both twins turned slowly toward their mother. Elena broke down completely. It's lying. Her voice cracked from terror and guilt. I said no such thing. The creature's jaw snapped open. Would you like to hear her prayers? It inhaled deeply, ribs expanding grotesquely. Then, with perfect clarity, in Elena's exact voice, it whispered, I should have smothered the other two. They're even worse than the first. The twins jerked as if stabbed. Elena screamed, No! Stop! But the creature began chanting in her voice, repeating words it had memorized. Words Elena had said in fear, in panic, in shame, not meant for anyone. Especially not her sons. The house shook so violently that glass cracked in the windows. The twins backed away, their huge bodies trembling with rage and confusion. You hated us, one whispered. No! Elena cried. I never. The creature crawled forward, faster than anything that size should move, closing the distance between them instantly. Its head jerked up, grin widening. I can show you what you really are. Before any of them reacted, it placed its palm on the left twin's chest. A violent thud echoed through the room. The giant staggered back, clutching his head, screaming. His brother grabbed him, but it was too late. The creature had opened something inside him. Visions flooded him, memories that weren't his. A woman screaming, a crib overturned, the ceiling crawling, a child with teeth, blood, shadows, rituals in the barn, the night the twins were born, their mother crying, their father running away, the creature laughing in the dark. The twin roared like an animal. He shoved his brother away. He punched the wall so hard it cracked like brittle bone. And the creature whispered, See? You're like me. The other twin charged. The creature jumped, too fast to follow, scrambling up the wall and onto the ceiling like an insect, its spindly limbs clicking across the wood as it stared down at them from above. Elena's voice was shaking uncontrollably. Boys, don't look at it. Don't listen to it, please. But the creature leaned upside down, hair dangling, head inches from the twins. You will be like me, it whispered. You were made from the same sin. The house lights exploded. The entire farmhouse plunged into darkness again, and the last thing they heard was the creature's whisper skittering across the ceiling. One of you will kill her. The other will help me finish the family. The moment the lights blew out, the house fell into a darkness so thick it felt like a living creature pressing against their skin. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Not the twins. Not Elena. Not even the creature on the ceiling. Then the house exhaled, a long, low groan deep in the beams, like the house itself was waking up after years of forced silence. The creature's voice swung through the dark, flitting from corner to corner, impossible to pinpoint. "Do you hear it?" "It remembers me." The twins moved first. Huge silhouettes shifting, breathing hard, circling their mother as if forming a shield. Even twisted by fear and confusion, their enormous bodies stood between her and the thing that wanted her soul. The creature clicked and skittered along the ceiling, circling them like a predator stalking prey. Elena whispered, voice trembling, "Don't let it speak. Don't let it inside your head." But it was too late. A long, distorted giggle rippled through the dark. Then, thump, something dropped from the ceiling behind them. A shape crawled, fast, bone joints cracking like dry wood. The right twin lunged toward the sound, only for the creature to appear behind him, impossibly quick. Its pale hand slid across his spine. He froze mid-step. His pupils blew wide. His lips trembled. "No," Elena whispered. "No. N-O. Don't let it." He turned slowly toward her. Something inside him had changed. The creature whispered, "Choose, brother." The right twin's body convulsed. Then he roared and charged at his mother. Elena shrieked. The left twin tackled his brother so hard the floor split beneath them. Both giants crashed through wooden boards and rolled across the room, fists flying, monstrous strength shaking the entire house. The creature crawled onto the wall, grinning. They were made to fall apart. Elena backed into the corner, whispering prayers she barely remembered. The twins grappled, smashing into furniture, cracking the doorframe, slamming into the wall hard enough to rattle the windows. "Stop!" she screamed. "Fight it!" The right twin, possessed, trembling, eyes dilated, lifted his brother by the throat. The ceiling creaked above them. The creature whispered, "Finish him." But the left twin's hand shot up, grabbing the creature's ankle, yanking it off the wall. The creature shrieked, an unholy, animalistic sound as its body snapped backward, slamming onto the floor. The left twin pounced. Huge fists hammered the creature's head, once, twice, again. Splinters of the floor flew. Blood sprayed, dark, thick, almost tar-like. But the creature did not die. Its broken jaw snapped back into place with a wet crunch. Then, it smiled. "You're the strong one," it whispered. "Good." Its fingers curled like hooks, and it jammed both hands into the twin's chest. The giant froze. His scream was guttural. Broken. Shaking. Elena watched, horrified, as his body convulsed violently. "Let him go," she cried. The creature whispered something into his heart. Something old, something forbidden, something that turned his blood to ice. Then, it shoved him backward. The huge man collapsed, twitching, his breath shallow, his eyes staring at nothing. Elena screamed, running to him, but the creature crawled between them, blocking her path. "Mama," it whispered. "Don't cry. I'll fix you next." The possessed right twin stumbled toward her again. "Mama? Mama? Mama?" His voice wasn't human anymore. The creature climbed onto his back like a parasite, its long fingers sliding into his hair, pulling his head downward as if steering him. "Bring her," it whispered. The house groaned. The walls shook. The floorboards shifted under Elena's feet, like something beneath the house was moving. The creature's voice deepened. "She buried me in this house. Now this house will bury her." Boards split. Nails tore free. Dust exploded upward like breath from an open grave. The house was opening. The right twin lunged, but the left twin, half conscious, grabbed his leg, stopping him. Elena crawled backward toward the wall, sobbing. The creature hissed. "You can't save her. You can't even save yourself." For the first time, the left twin spoke clearly. "I'm not saving me." He lifted his brother, all 7 feet and monstrous weight. And with a final burst of strength, he threw him into the creature. All three crashed through the collapsing floor, their screams and the creature's shrieks echoing into the darkness below. Elena crawled to the edge of the hole. She looked down. Beneath the house was not soil. It was a chamber, a ritual chamber. Symbols she didn't remember carving, bones she didn't remember burying. Shadows she didn't want to see. Her sons, her giants, lay broken in the dirt. The creature stood among them, a small, pale nightmare with a smile too wide. It looked up at her. "Come, Mama." Elena shook her head violently. "No, no. Please." It reached up with both arms. "You made me. Now finish what you started." Elena turned and ran. She sprinted through the house, down the hallway, toward the front door. But the door slammed shut by itself. The windows locked. The shutters twisted. The house groaned one last time. And the floor beneath her split open. She fell, screaming, into the darkness below. Her scream cut off abruptly. The creature whispered, "Family is whole." The house went still. The wind stopped. The night died. And the old farmhouse, the one the townspeople always avoided, the one that whispered at night, the one that groaned like something buried beneath it could breathe, went quiet. Forever. Some stories end with justice. Some end with truth. But this one ends exactly the way it began, in darkness. The farmhouse still stands. Empty, rotting, breathing. Locals say that on quiet nights, if you walk past it, you can hear 3 voices echoing from beneath the floor, 2 deep, heavy breaths, and 1 small, twisted laugh that never grew up and never stayed buried. A mother's sins were uncovered, her sons' lives were swallowed, and the thing she created in secret, it got what it always wanted: a complete family. Whether you believe in curses, in bloodline corruption, or in houses that remember the sins done inside them, the truth remains: some families don't need demons. They become their own. If you made it to the end of this nightmare, thank you for braving tonight's journey. This is Forgotten Remains, where we dig up the stories the world tried to bury, but that refused to stay dead. Until next time, sleep lightly. You never know what might be crawling under your floorboards.